My name is Reagan Cole. I'm 24 years old, and I just graduated from Stanford with a degree in computer engineering. But this story, it's not really about a graduation gift. It's about the quiet line between gratitude and humiliation, between being loved for who you are and being valued only for what you give. Before we continue, take a moment to subscribe to the channel, but only if you truly believe that courage is what helps us keep moving forward. And I'd really love to know where you're listening from and what the temperature is like there right now. This is a fictional story. Some details have been enhanced with the help of artificial intelligence to make it more vivid, but the emotions behind it are completely real. Now, let me take you back in time. Stanford's main quad shimmered under rows of deep red banners dancing in the warm June breeze. The steady rhythm of drums echoed across the courtyard, blending with applause, laughter, and the announcer's voice calling out each graduate's name. I walked beside my twin sister, Lydia Cole. We wore identical black gowns, square caps, and gold honor cords resting across our shoulders. From a distance, I spotted our mother waving excitedly. Her smile was wide, glowing with pride. But even from that far away, I noticed something. Her eyes stayed on Lydia just a little longer, as if the entire moment, the entire day, had been built just for her. When we reached them, Mom rushed forward and wrapped Lydia in a tight embrace. "Oh, my beautiful girl," she whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. Then she pulled out a cream-colored envelope, tied neatly with a silk ribbon. "A trip to Europe," she announced proudly. "All expenses paid. You deserve this. Lydia, you deserve everything." People nearby turned, some clapped, others smiled. Lydia lit up instantly, laughing, glowing, thanking them over and over again like she had just been handed the world. And I stood right there beside her, holding my diploma, smiling politely, hoping no one could hear the hollow echo inside my chest. Then it was my turn. Mom turned toward me with the same smile, but something behind her eyes had shifted. Just slightly, just enough. She handed me a smaller envelope, thinner. I opened it. Inside was a $10 coffee gift card and a small note, written in careful handwriting. "Gratitude makes life richer." Somewhere behind her, my father, Daniel Cole, spoke gently, almost like he was offering wisdom instead of dismissal. "We just want you to appreciate the little things. Reagan, life isn't always about big adventures." I nodded, not because I agreed, not because I felt touched, but because I was used to this. In our family, love didn't come in equal measure. It came divided. One daughter was given the world, the other was given a lesson. I stayed quiet, blending into the laughter around us as Lydia excitedly listed the cities she'd soon visit. Paris, Rome, Vienna. Her voice flowed effortlessly, like music everyone wanted to listen to. I looked down at my hands. The faint calluses on my fingertips were still there. From years of coding late into the night, building systems, fixing bugs, finishing projects for Helixis Tech, the company I had been quietly working with since my sophomore year. These hands were the same ones that had been paying every single mortgage bill for the house my parents still lived in, that small suburban home with the white porch, the one they once said they would lose if no one stepped in. They were standing in it, living in it, because of me. But they didn't remember. Or maybe they never wanted to. I said nothing. I just tightened my grip on my diploma, feeling the cold press of the leather cover sink into my palm. As the applause around us slowly faded into something distant and unreal, the final drumbeat faded, and the courtyard erupted into cheers. Caps soared into the golden sunlight, spinning wildly above us like pieces of a moment too bright to hold on to. I tilted my head up, watching them drift through the air. And something about it all felt strangely distant. Lydia and I were born 1 minute apart. We grew up in the same house, studied at the same table, wore the same honors cords today, and yet somehow, our lives had been assigned completely different values. $10 and everything? The thought settled in my chest, sharp and undeniable, right there, surrounded by celebration and music. I understood something with absolute clarity. This was not just my graduation from Stanford, it was my graduation from my own family, in every memory I had. Lydia was always the light of our home. She had effortless charm, a voice that flowed easily, and a way of making people feel special just by being near her. Me. I was what everyone called the smart, quiet one. I used to think that meant something good, until I realized it was just a softer way of saying I was not the one people noticed. I remember one moment so clearly it still feels real. I was 10 years old, sitting at a piano recital in our town's small arts center. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper. Framed certificates lined the walls. I played Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, every note practiced for weeks. When I finished, the room was quiet for a second. Then my mother's voice came from the back. "You should be softer. Reagan, music is not math." I nodded, even though my throat tightened. Then Lydia took her turn. She missed a few notes. Her hands trembled slightly. But when she finished, she smiled. And that was enough. Mom rushed forward, wrapping her in a hug. "That was beautiful. Sweetheart. You played with heart." I stood there beside them, holding my sheet music, pretending I did not notice the difference everyone could feel, but no one would ever say out loud. We were always told our parents loved us equally. But some truths do not need to be spoken. They show themselves clearly. Like sunlight at noon, Lydia was the one chosen to shine, the one who told stories at dinner, the one Mom proudly introduced to others. I was the one who made sure everything worked. When the Wi-Fi went down, Dad called me. When Mom could not log into her accounts, she came to me. When their credit card failed during an online purchase, I was the one who fixed it. I never complained, partly because I was used to it, and partly because I believed being useful was the only way I could matter. Lydia always knew what to say. She could turn any mistake into something charming, something people laughed about. Me. Every time I spoke honestly, the room seemed to go quiet. I remember one dinner when our Aunt Claire asked what we wanted to become. Lydia smiled brightly. "I want to be an economist and help make the world better." Everyone clapped. Then it was my turn. "I want to build software to improve medical data systems." There was a pause. Aunt Claire gave a polite smile. "That sounds complicated." Dad chuckled. "She has always been into machines. Not exactly the warm type." Everyone laughed. And I laughed too. Not because it was funny, but because silence would have felt heavier. Over time, I learned something I could not unlearn. In my family, your worth was not measured by what you did. It was measured by how you made others feel. Lydia made them feel proud. I made them feel uncomfortable. They always said they treated us the same. But their version of fairness felt like a scale slightly tilted. Just enough to ease their conscience. Never enough to reflect the truth. One winter evening, I found Mom arranging flowers in the kitchen. "Reagan," she said gently, "you should try to be softer like your sister. You are always so serious." I wanted to tell her that someone had to be serious or the lights in this house would not stay on during winter. But instead, I just said, I will try. Mom, I started freelancing during my sophomore year, while most of my classmates were juggling part-time jobs. I was introduced through a research friend to a startup in Seattle called Nexacore Health, a company working on artificial intelligence for medical imaging. They needed someone to design their interface. I sent in my portfolio without expecting much. I had no idea then that this quiet decision would begin to change everything. They were looking for someone to design the interface for their AI system that analyzed X-rays and MRIs. I sent my portfolio without expecting anything in return. The next morning, they called me. The interview lasted exactly 12 minutes. A week later, I received an email offering me a remote freelance position, $7,000 a month. It was more money than I ever imagined earning as a sophomore. I remember sitting alone in my tiny dorm room that night, staring at my screen as my bank balance crossed 5 digits for the first time. I did not celebrate. I did not tell anyone. I just smiled quietly, maybe because I already knew what they would say if I did. You are lucky. Reagan. Do not let it get to your head. So I kept it to myself. My life became simple and structured. I woke up early, went to classes during the day, then spent nights coding, while my friends went out. I stayed in with cold coffee and endless lines of Python, but I never felt alone. For the first time, I felt valuable in a way no comparison could take away. Every month, Nexacore transferred the payment right on time. I paid my tuition, covered my living expenses, and still had money left. I did not spend it. I saved it, almost instinctively, like someone who had learned that security was something you had to build for yourself. Then one evening, my father called. His voice sounded tired, heavier than usual. He said the bank had raised their mortgage rate. The monthly payment would increase by nearly $900. In the background, my mother's voice cut in, half frustrated, half blaming. If your father had not invested in those properties in Brookfield, we would not be dealing with this. I stayed quiet, listening as a familiar tightness formed in my chest. The house in Westbridge was the only one they had left, and I knew he would never let it go. After the call ended, I opened my laptop. I logged into my bank account and set up a recurring transfer. In the memo line, I typed Cole Household Reagan contribution from that moment on. Every month, $3,200 left my account automatically, paying the mortgage on the house they were so desperate to keep. I never told them. In the months that followed, my mother would call and casually talk about fixing the roof or replacing appliances. Her voice sounded lighter again, almost relieved. I thought she knew. I thought maybe, somewhere deep down, they felt grateful, but they did not. They never asked where the money came from. They never said thank you. Instead, they said things like, the bank must have given us more time, or maybe the interest rate dropped. I stayed silent and kept sending the payments. Not for recognition, not for appreciation. I did it because I wanted them to see that I had grown up, that I could carry weight they once believed I was too rigid to understand. To me, it was proof that love did not need to be loud. It could exist quietly, in small, invisible acts. But over time, I began to understand something else. In this family, nothing counted unless it looked impressive from the outside. If your kindness was not visible, it might as well not exist at all. I remember one afternoon overhearing my mother talking to a neighbor. Lydia just got an internship in New York. She is incredibly talented. I stood nearby, listening, not angry, not even hurt. Just quietly aware of the money still leaving my account every month, keeping the very house she stood in from slipping away. That secret became both the lightest and heaviest thing I carried. Light. Because it reminded me I could give without needing praise. Heavy. Because it showed me that in this family, kindness alone would never earn respect. Looking back now, I understand something I could not see then. Silence does not protect you. It only makes others believe they were right to overlook you. And for years, I had been helping them believe exactly that. That evening, our graduation dinner was held in the same warm, golden-lit dining room where I had spent my entire childhood. The dining room looked exactly the same as it always had. Warm, golden light filled the space, reflecting off polished surfaces and familiar walls that had witnessed every version of my life. The table was covered with a crisp white cloth. Wine glasses shimmered under the chandelier. In the center sat a cake with delicate cursive writing. Congratulations, Lydia and Reagan. But Lydia's name was written twice the size. I noticed it instantly, the same way I had noticed 1,000 small details over the past 24 years. Dinner began with laughter and raised glasses. Mom spoke animatedly about the Europe trip, listing every city Lydia had ever dreamed of visiting. Dad lifted his glass, smiling proudly. He said both his daughters were brilliant, but Lydia clearly had a natural gift for leadership. I sat there quietly, cutting a small piece of cake, listening as their voices blended into something warm and familiar. And in that moment, I understood something simple and undeniable. I was not part of this scene. I was a guest at my own family's table, as dessert came to an end. Mom turned to me. Her tone softened, almost gentle, as if she were offering something meaningful. Reagan, you should learn to be content with less. Not everyone needs big things to be happy. Gratitude makes life richer. Remember, she smiled like she had just given me wisdom. I looked at her, then at Lydia, who was busy taking pictures of her dessert, adjusting the angle to capture the perfect moment. I nodded politely, but inside my mind, a different thought settled, quiet and precise. It is not that I am not enough. It is that they refuse to see me as more. After dinner, everyone drifted away from the table. I stayed behind. The house felt still. The old wall clock ticked steadily, just as it always had. But this time, every second sounded different. Not routine, not comfort. A countdown. I went upstairs without hesitation. I opened my closet and pulled out a suitcase. Laptop, external drive, notebook, mortgage receipts. Everything neatly placed inside. No tears, no hesitation, only silence. The kind of silence that comes when you have been preparing for something your entire life. Outside, the early summer air carried a faint chill. I got into my old car and drove across the Rivergate Bridge, watching the city lights ripple across the dark water below. On the other side lay North Bridge, where glass buildings reflected the night sky like scattered constellations. I found a small apartment on the third floor of an aging brick building. Its single window overlooked a quiet street. When I signed the lease, I wrote my name slowly and firmly. Reagan Cole. No shared accounts. No hidden contributions. Just me. When I stepped inside, I opened the windows and let the cool air move through the room. Then I began removing every remaining tie to my old life. I turned off location sharing, changed every password, updated every account, removed every access that had once connected me to them. With each step, something inside me loosened, like taking off something that had been tightening around my throat for years. I made a simple meal and sat on the bare wooden floor, the soft glow of my laptop reflecting against the walls. Outside, the city moved on as it always did, but inside me, there was a stillness I had never felt before. I opened a blank document and typed a single sentence. If they want to understand gratitude, I will teach them through silence. A week passed. Each morning, sunlight stretched across the worn floor of my small apartment. The distant hum of traffic replaced the familiar noise of my old home. No calls for breakfast, no shared notifications, no reminders tied to responsibilities that were never truly mine. Everything felt clear, clean, as if my life had finally been cut free from invisible strings I once mistook for duty. I worked harder than ever. Nexacore sent new projects, and I immersed myself completely in code, data, and systems that once filled only the edges of my time. Now, they filled everything. I no longer checked their accounts. No more reminders about due dates or payments that were never truly mine to carry. On Saturday night, I made a cup of tea, turned on a soft jazz playlist, and sat by the window. For the first time, freedom did not feel empty. It felt calm. It felt like peace. Then Sunday morning came. My phone rang. The screen lit up with one word: Mom. I stared at it for a few seconds before answering. On the other end, I heard quiet sobbing, uneven, fragile. Reagan. What did you do to the mortgage account? The bank keeps sending alerts. They said this month's payment was canceled. I kept my voice steady. I stopped paying. Mom, I do not live there anymore. Silence followed. Then my father's voice cut in, tight and sharp. What do you mean you stopped? You cannot just do that. We are family. You have a responsibility. A small breath left my lips. Not angry, just tired. I helped for 18 months. Dad. Now I am practicing gratitude in my own way. My mother's crying grew louder. My father's voice rose, filled with frustration, accusing me of being selfish, of abandoning my own family. I did not interrupt. I let him speak until the words ran out. Then I said quietly, I do not owe anyone anything anymore. I have paid enough in time, in money, and in trust. And I ended the call. The room fell silent again. I sat there, watching my phone light up again and again. Missed calls. Mom 5 times, Dad 3. Then the screen went dark. I expected guilt, but it never came. Instead, something else settled in, a quiet I had never known before. Peace. For the first time. I was not the daughter who existed to fix everything, not the one who quietly carried what no one else wanted to face. I stood up and opened the window. The morning air drifted in, cool and soft, carrying the distant sound of church bells. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. My silence frightened them, because they had never imagined a version of me that stopped paying for their comfort. That night, my phone kept buzzing nonstop. I turned it face down on the table, opened my laptop, and returned to my work. As the pale glow of the screen filled the room, a familiar line appeared in my transaction history. Cole Household Reagan Contribution. I paused. Then I pressed delete. The line disappeared. A small action, but it felt lighter than breathing. Later that weekend, just after finishing a build for Nexacore, I was about to make another cup of tea when a new email appeared. The subject line was cold and precise. Please confirm request to add backup payment method to mortgage account. Cole Residence. My chest tightened slightly. I opened it. It was from the bank. A detailed summary of the loan history, along with 2 options to confirm or decline. At the bottom, a note. If you did not initiate this request, please contact us within 48 hours. I did not click anything. I picked up my phone and called directly. The representative spoke calmly, asking me to verify my identity. After confirming my information, she continued. We received a request to add a backup payment method to the mortgage account under Daniel Cole. The request was submitted using an account previously linked to yours. I listened carefully. Every word felt deliberate. Not an error. Not confusion. A choice. I took a steady breath and asked to be transferred to the transactions department. I requested a full review, timestamps, access points, submission method, on the line. The specialist read through the records one by one, pausing occasionally to note details. According to our system, the request was submitted through the customer portal under the name Daniel Cole. At the bottom of the request, there was a short note: maintain timely payments. I stared at it for a moment. The apartment felt unusually still, the only sound coming from the soft hum of my laptop. Then I spoke clearly. I do not authorize this. That account is no longer used for any loan payments. Any attempt to reconnect it is unauthorized. My voice stayed calm, steady. It felt natural, like counting seconds before pressing enter on something that mattered, right after the call. I asked the bank to freeze the previous link and log the case as unauthorized activity. The representative confirmed everything. Payment changes would be blocked. A fraud alert would be placed. A case number would be issued. I repeated the number twice, wrote it down carefully, and requested a confirmation email with a timestamp. Then I asked for all previously authorized users, anyone except me, to be removed from the account profile. I requested that every future transaction be locked behind two-factor authentication under my sole control until the case was resolved. The specialist agreed and said a dispute package would be sent for my signature, including a full summary and instructions for submitting evidence. When the call ended, I opened my finance folder, one by one. I dragged every screenshot of the transfers I had made over the past 18 months onto the screen. Each file carried the same label: Cole Household Reagan Contribution, every amount, every date, every confirmation code. I created a spreadsheet: start date, frequency, end date. At the bottom, I added one final line: payments stopped after graduation. Then I captured the bank's warning email with full headers, downloaded the official case confirmation, and organized everything into a new folder: Evidence Cole House, inside. I created subfolders: history, bank, emails, call logs, identification, case files, screenshots. My instincts took over. I treated it like a system failure that needed to be traced and documented. Every file labeled, every detail stored, everything backed up. Then my phone buzzed. Mom. I looked at the screen for a few seconds, then let it ring. A message followed immediately. Your father only added a backup option. It is not a big deal. That is our family home. I set the phone aside and turned back to my laptop. I drafted an email to the bank. Clear, direct. I stated that any attempt to modify payment methods from accounts or devices not belonging to me had been done without my consent. I attached my identification, my updated address, and requested that all primary contact information be changed to me alone, with no further notification sent to any shared family accounts. Night settled quickly outside. Streetlights cast a soft golden glow against the window. I sat still, fingers resting lightly on the keyboard, and suddenly, something became clear. A boundary I had never been able to define before now stood sharp and undeniable. For 18 months, I had filled every gap they left behind. I had carried the weight, held everything together, kept that house from falling apart. And now, the moment I stepped away, they were not just asking me to come back. They were trying to reconnect the system without permission. This was not an accident. It was a decision. I opened my password manager and reset everything. Every credential, every account that had once been shared. I enabled multi-layer authentication, logged out unknown devices, removed every trace of access that was not mine. Then I opened my calendar and set a reminder. Follow-up dispute status. 3 business days. Below it, I added another note. If necessary, move all finances to a new bank. When I finished, I closed my laptop and leaned back. The room was quiet, but it no longer felt empty. I knew exactly what I was doing. Some truths need to be spoken. Others only need to be documented and left for time to reveal. The folder on my desktop sat there. Evidence Cole House. Every file inside it was proof of something I once thought I would never need to prove. And in that moment, I understood something clearly. I was no longer protecting their home. I was protecting my own boundaries. The next morning, I drove back to Westbridge under a gray, heavy sky. The air felt thick, as if rain was waiting but refusing to fall. The road into the neighborhood looked the same, lined with tall maple trees standing quietly on either side, but something felt different. Or maybe it was me. The house came into view at the end of the street. The front door was slightly open. My father's old SUV sat in the driveway, parked at an angle, just like it always had. I pulled up to the curb, turned off the engine, and sat there for a moment. My heart was steady. No fear, no hesitation. Just a quiet calm that comes when you have faced the same truth too many times for it to hurt anymore. The front door opened as I stepped onto the porch. Dad stood there, still broad-shouldered, but thinner somehow, more worn. He did not greet me. He simply said, "We need to talk." I nodded and walked inside. Mom sat on the couch, her eyes red and swollen. Lydia leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, her expression guarded and sharp. The room felt heavy, like every word had already been spoken somewhere beneath the silence. Dad began, his voice tight. "We just want to keep the house. Reagan, you know what happens if the bank takes it. We will lose everything. I only added the backup payment for security." I looked at him steadily. Security for who? Dad, for the house or for your control? His expression hardened instantly. "Do not talk like that. This is your responsibility too. You are part of this family." I took a slow breath. I am trying to keep my dignity. The room went still. Mom lowered her head, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. Lydia was the first to speak, her tone edged with frustration. "Reagan, you are overreacting. Dignity. Really, they are just scared." I turned to her. I was not angry, just tired. Maybe I am taking it seriously because I am the only one here who knows what it feels like to carry the cost. Her expression shifted. The confidence in her face flickered, then faded. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Dad looked away. Mom quietly wiped her tears. I stood up and let my gaze move around the room. The framed family photo on the wall, the furniture I had once ordered, the router I had set up so everything would run smoothly. Small pieces of a life I had helped build. And yet, I had never truly belonged in it. I walked toward the door. No one stopped me. No one spoke. Outside, the wind moved gently through the trees, carrying the faint scent of damp earth. For the first time in years, I did not cry. There was nothing left for tears to fix. I got into my car and started the engine. In the rearview mirror, I saw them standing there, 3 figures inside the house they were so desperate to keep, not realizing they had already lost something far more important: trust. I turned the wheel and drove away. This time, I was not leaving to escape. I was leaving to never return as someone who owed them anything. If you think my parents were right to expect me to keep paying the mortgage and sacrificing silently, comment great. But if you feel that what they did was unfair, taking without ever acknowledging, then comment, that's so unfair. Sometimes the hardest part is not what we give, but realizing when it's never truly valued. I'd really like to know which side you stand on. When I arrived back in Northbridge, something inside me had shifted. There was no emptiness, only a steady calm that comes when you stop waiting for approval that will never come. I focused completely on my work. Nexacor began assigning me larger projects. I worked on improving AI interfaces for early lung cancer detection. I designed behavioral models for diabetes management systems. Each project stretched across months, requiring patience, precision, and something I had learned to master: the ability to find order inside complexity. Within 3 months, I secured 3 new contracts, all through referrals from medical engineers I had worked with before. One night, while sitting in my small apartment, an email appeared from a former client. Reagan, have you ever thought about building your own brand? People already recognize your design style. Quiet precision. I read that phrase again and again. Quiet precision. And for the first time, I saw myself clearly. Not loud, not attention-seeking, but focused, consistent, exact. That was who I had always been. I started my own company soon after, Mind Health Design, a small startup focused on user experience and healthcare technology. I brought in 2 freelancers I trusted and rented a modest office on the 3rd floor of a brick building near Northbridge Square. On the wall, I pinned a sheet of paper with a single line written in bold ink. We design clarity for those who save lives. Every morning, I made coffee, opened the window, and watched the light move across my desk. It felt like starting over, this time, on my own terms. When the company signed its first clients, revenue quickly surpassed anything I had earned before. One of Nexacor's projects was transferred directly to my company under a full contract. I was no longer working for someone else. I was building something of my own. I paid off my student loans. Then I moved into a small apartment in Easton Heights. Bright, quiet, filled only with the smell of coffee and the soft sound of wind brushing past the windows. For the first time, no one was watching. No one was measuring me. I simply existed as myself. Then one day, I received another email. A health tech investor I once heard speak at a university event had reached out. He wanted to recommend me for a startup mentorship program. I read the message slowly. I had never imagined returning there not as a student, but as a founder. I presented my company's vision in front of a panel of experts. When I finished, the lead judge shook my hand and said, "This is what real impact looks like. Quiet, but undeniable." My hands trembled slightly as I walked out of the room. Not from fear, from something deeper. All those nights alone, all the silence that once made me invisible. Now they spoke for me in a way no one could ignore. I did not post about any of it. My social media remained simple: a desk, a laptop, a cup of coffee, lines of code, light moving across a wall. No displays of success, no need for validation, but even that drew attention. One evening, a message appeared from Lydia. "Are you working with the Stanford lab now? Mom mentioned something, but I did not believe it. You are really doing well." I read it and set the phone down. I did not reply, because I understood something. What caught her attention was not my success. It was the shift. For the first time, she was no longer the center of everything, and for the first time, I did not feel the need to explain myself. I took a sip of coffee and watched the code move across my screen. I was not the same person anymore. I had finally returned to myself. One autumn afternoon, when the trees near Northbridge Square had turned deep shades of red, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, I paused. Lydia stood there. Her coat was elegant, her posture composed, but something about her had changed. She looked thinner, tired. Her eyes moved around my apartment, taking in the quiet space, the simplicity, and for a brief moment, I saw something I had never seen in her before. Surprise. Maybe she had expected something else. A cold room, a lonely life, not soft light, quiet warmth, and small green plants by the window. "Are you busy?" she asked, her voice lower than I remembered. I stepped aside and let her in. She sat across from my desk, hands clasped together, saying nothing at first. The silence stretched before she finally spoke. "Mom is sick." Her voice trembled slightly. "She is too stressed. She cannot sleep." She paused, then continued. "Dad is not doing well either. The doctor says he is showing signs of depression. They are about to lose the house. The bank already sent a foreclosure notice." I listened without interrupting. The only sound between us was the quiet ticking of the clock. Lydia kept going, as if the silence pushed her forward. "Everything fell apart after you left. Mom says you broke the family. Dad says if you had kept helping like before, none of this would have happened." Then she looked at me. There was something in her eyes I could not quite name. Part accusation, part pleading. "Reagan, you are destroying this family." I took a slow breath and straightened slightly in my chair. I looked at her. The person who had shared my life from the very beginning, and yet now felt like someone I barely knew. "No, Lydia," I said calmly, "I did not destroy anything. You are just seeing what happens when people stop appreciating what they have." She froze. Her lips parted, but no words came out. For a brief moment, something flickered across her face. Maybe anger, maybe shame, or maybe the quiet realization of something she had always avoided. Her voice softened. "You have changed?" A small smile touched my lips, faint and almost tired. "No, I just stopped paying for love." She lowered her gaze to the cup of tea in her hands. Outside, the wind brushed lightly against the window, moving the curtain in slow, uneven waves. I did not feel angry. I did not feel sorry for her either. There was only distance between us now, not the kind created by space or time, but the kind built over years. Years where one person was loved for being visible, while the other carried everything quietly in the background. After a while, Lydia stood up. "I will tell them you are not going to help anymore." I shook my head gently. "You do not need to say anything. If they want to understand, they will." She gave a small nod and walked toward the door. When it closed behind her, I stayed where I was. I moved to the window and watched her walk down the street, her figure slowly fading into the line of trees covered in fallen leaves. I did not feel victory, only something lighter. Release. There were no tears, no final words, no attempt to fix what had already been broken, just truth, simple, unpolished, necessary. For the first time, I was not the one trying to save everything. I was just myself, standing in a quiet room, holding a cup of tea that was still warm, surrounded by a peace so soft it almost made a sound. One early winter morning, when the city was wrapped in a thin layer of fog, my phone began to fill with unfamiliar notifications. The notifications kept coming, one after another. Each message carried a screenshot from the family's social media page, comments stacked beneath it. Some shocked, some angry, some confused, filled with question marks and disbelief. I opened one of them. It was a copy of my parents' bank statement. The monthly mortgage payments were clearly listed. And, in the memo line, impossible to miss, were the words Cole Household Reagan Contribution. Below it, my Aunt Claire had written in all caps, "Unbelievable. Reagan has been paying their mortgage for over a year and no one said anything." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then slowly exhaled. I knew I had not sent that file intentionally, but somehow, it had reached exactly where it needed to. A few days earlier, I had attached the same document while preparing my taxes, planning to ask my accountant to review the transactions. I must have added the family group by mistake while clearing my inbox. One small click, and everything unraveled. The family chat exploded. From Westbridge to nearby towns, phones rang constantly, messages poured in without pause. Some were stunned. She did all of that, and no one mentioned it. Some were angry. What kind of parents allow their daughter to carry that burden alone? Others tried to defend them. Maybe it was just family responsibility. Maybe they did not realize. But it no longer mattered. The truth was out. And once it was seen, it could not be hidden again. That evening, my mother called. Her voice trembled, caught somewhere between panic and disbelief. "Reagan, what have you done? You could have just stopped helping. Why did you let everyone find out?" I answered calmly. "I did not tell anyone anything. I only showed what I had already done." There was silence. Then the line went dead. 2 days later, my father called. His voice was different this time, heavier, stripped of its usual certainty. "Do you know this has spread everywhere? Even at church. People are saying we took advantage of you. I have lost respect among my friends. What did you gain from this?" I closed my eyes for a moment. Then I spoke slowly. "I did not gain anything. Dad, I just stopped hiding the truth. And if the truth is uncomfortable, that is not my responsibility." Rumors spread quickly. At the church where my mother volunteered, people whispered about the Cole house, about the daughter who had been quietly paying for everything. Neighbors sent me messages. "Reagan, we had no idea. You did so much for them. They were lucky to have you." I read every message. I did not reply. I did not want attention. I only wanted the truth to exist without being buried. And then, reality followed. The bank rejected their refinancing request. The reason was simple. The primary source of payment had stopped. Sooner or later, the house in Westbridge would be taken. I did not feel satisfaction. Not even a trace of it. What I felt was something quieter, like the stillness after a storm passes. That evening, I stood on my small balcony, watching the city lights blur through the mist. I thought about them, sitting in that house, surrounded by boxes, silence filling the spaces where certainty used to live. Maybe they were on the phone with the bank. Maybe they were trying to hold on to what was already slipping away. But to me, the real loss was not the house. It was something they had treated as if it did not matter. Trust. I stood there for a long time, the cold air brushing against my skin, and for the first time, I realized something important. I did not need to win. I only needed the truth to be seen clearly, without excuses, without pretending, because now, no matter what was lost, at least none of us were living in illusions anymore. Not them. Not me. A few weeks later, on a cold and damp afternoon, I saw my mother again by chance. I parked outside a grocery store in Northbridge, its warm yellow lights glowing softly against the cold air. I only planned to grab a few things: vegetables, oatmeal, peppermint tea, then head home to finish my proposal. My life had become quiet and structured, peaceful in a way I had never known before. Inside, Soft light filled the aisles. People moved slowly, carts rolling gently across the floor. I stood in the produce section, picking up a bundle of greens, my thoughts drifting to my upcoming talk about independence and quiet strength. A faint smile touched my lips. Then a voice behind me stopped everything. "Reagan." I froze, then turned. It was Mom. She stood a few steps away, holding an empty basket. She looked smaller, thinner. Her hair streaked with gray, her face lined with exhaustion. Her eyes met mine, heavy and tired. She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Reagan, I am sorry." That was all she said, and it was enough. I knew this was the moment she had avoided for so long. I stood still, my hand tightening slightly. I did not feel anger, only something quiet and complicated. She lowered her head, tears falling. "I treated you like you were just there to support us. I see it now. I was wrong." Her words came slowly, weighted with years. I could not remember ever hearing her say that before. I looked at her. This woman who once seemed so certain, now standing fragile under the bright lights, only a few steps between us. Yet it felt like a distance that could not be crossed. I took a breath. "Mom, I have already forgiven you." My voice stayed calm, "but I am not coming back." She shook her head, gripping the basket. "I am not asking you to come back," she whispered. "I just needed you to know I am sorry. I never thought it would end like this." Her voice broke. "The house. It is gone. Your father. He is not the same anymore. Everything has changed." Her voice broke as she spoke. I said nothing. I just watched her shoulders shake, her hands gripping the empty basket like it was the only thing holding her together. I almost spoke, then stopped. There was nothing left to fix. The silence between us said more than words ever could. A few people passed by, glancing briefly before moving on. The world kept going, unchanged. And somehow, that made me feel lighter. Mom stepped closer and reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold, fragile. I did not pull away. "I am sorry," she whispered again. "I should have protected you." Not the other way around. I looked at her hand, the same hand that once tied my hair before school, the same hand that had signed the loans I quietly paid. I gave it a small, firm squeeze, not to comfort, but to acknowledge. "I know. Mom, I hope you find peace." We stood there in silence. No tears, no embrace, just quiet understanding. After a moment, she let go and walked toward the checkout. She looked smaller with each step, almost lost inside that heavy coat. Halfway there, she turned back. Our eyes met for a second. Then she nodded softly and continued on. I stayed where I was. A soft song played overhead, drifting through the air, around me. Everything felt ordinary. Bright aisles, moving people, the scent of fresh bread, and for the first time in years, silence no longer hurt. I placed the basket back on the counter and walked out. The cold air hit me, but I kept moving, crossing the parking lot without looking back. I did not know where she would go next, and I did not need to, because I understood something clearly now. Forgiveness is not about going back. It is about letting go. It is about being able to say, "I forgive you," without feeling pain. On the drive home, the city lights blurred across the windshield, reflecting softly back at me. In the reflection of the windshield, I saw someone different. Still me, but clearer. No longer the daughter waiting to be recognized, but a woman who had already proven her worth. Not by staying, but by choosing to walk away. When I pulled up in front of my building, a small, certain smile appeared. In the middle of a restless city, I finally felt something I had not allowed myself to believe in for years. Freedom. A year later, I stepped onto a stage I once only imagined from a distance. The lights were bright, the room was filled with faces, and standing there, I saw myself in a way I never had before. Not the quiet student behind a screen, but someone steady, someone visible, someone real. That day, I did not speak about technology. I spoke about the path that brought me there, about learning to choose self-respect over approval, about how kindness still matters, even when no one acknowledges it, because it shapes who we are, not how others measure us. I said something simple. Some people learn gratitude by receiving. I learned it by stopping my giving when it was no longer valued. For a moment, the room fell completely silent. Then the applause came, not just loud, but genuine. It was not about validation, it was recognition. The kind that comes when your voice finally reaches beyond the silence it once lived in. After that, Coal Mind Health Design launched a fellowship program to support women in healthcare technology. I built it for those who carried responsibilities quietly, the way I once did, so they would never have to choose between their future and the expectations placed on them. That evening, after everything settled, I returned home. The city lights stretched across the river, reflecting like gold in motion. I stood by the window, holding a warm cup of tea. On the wall, framed carefully between my work and achievements, was something small. The $10 gift card from my graduation. Gratitude makes life richer. Once, those words felt like a wound. Now, they felt like a reminder, not of what I lacked, but of how far I had come. A quiet symbol of a journey that turned pain into strength. I looked at it for a long time, a faint smile settling in, and, in that still moment, a thought rose clearly. Without bitterness, I did learn gratitude, just not the way they intended. If you would make the same choice as I did, choosing to walk away and protect your self-worth instead of staying where you are not valued. Write yes, so I know I wasn't alone. If you would choose differently. Write no. And if you are still thinking about it, maybe is okay too. This story is not about winning or losing. It is about having the courage to choose yourself, even when it hurts. Sometimes, love is not about staying and sacrificing endlessly. Sometimes, it is about knowing when to step back, to grow, and to finally breathe. You deserve to be seen, to be respected, and to live a life where your value is not measured by how much you give. If this story touched something in you, take a moment to subscribe, leave a comment, like, and share it with someone who might need to hear this today. Your voice matters more than you think, and together, we can build a community where every story has value. Thank you for being here with me.